When you think about historical figures who have changed the world, a few names automatically come to mind. Names like Jesus Christ, Martin Luther, or Abraham Lincoln. Not too many authors would come to mind, however. There are a few whose works have served to influence modern literature beyond what we could imagine. One of these authors is known to his friends and family simply as Jack. However, the world knows him as C.S. Lewis. Most everyone alive knows about C.S. Lewis' famous Narnia series, which I have one of the books here. There's a great deal about his life that most people aren't aware of. Clive Staples Lewis was born on November 29, 1898, to Richard and Joy Lewis. Lewis had an interesting childhood. He was obsessed with anthropomorphic animals, meaning animals with human characteristics such as speech. Like this here is a frog and it walks. He and his brother created a fictional world called Boxen. This world was created when Lewis' stories about a place called Animal Land and his brother's stories about a life in India were brought together. At the age of 7, Jack's family moved into a new home in East Belfast, which has been given the name Little Lee. Around this same time, a flu epidemic was devastating life in Europe. Because of this, he and his brother were not allowed to go out of the house, so they were forced to read. This is most likely the greatest influence on his becoming an author and an English professor later in life. He said that it was very easy to find books in his house due to an extensive library. He has been quoted as saying, "Finding a new book to read was as easy as walking into a field and finding a new blade of grass." Lewis was schooled by private tutors as a child. When it was time for him to go to college, he attended several colleges around the area, but was forced to leave for different reasons, including respiratory problems. Finally, in 1916, he was awarded a scholarship to Oxford, where he finished his university studies, and eventually began to teach there. According to Lewis's biography, while studying at Malvern College at the age of 15, Lewis became an atheist for unknown reasons, and became interested in the occult. He then went to fight in World War I and experienced trench warfare hand-to-hand. After the war, he went back to his intellectual life, reading, writing, and eventually teaching. In 1929, Lewis's great colleague at Oxford and the famous author of Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien, which here's the ring here, helped to send him back on a path to believing in God. Lewis began acknowledging the existence of some God, but didn't believe that it had anything to do with him, so he was a deist. In 1931, he converted back to Christianity. Lewis admitted that he was impractical as an atheist. He's quoted as saying, "I was angry at God for not existing," which just shows how misled and he words it as being paradoxical he was. It wasn't until Lewis's later life that he found love in the form of Joy Gresham. Lewis at first only saw her as an intellectual partner and friend. According to Cynthia Haven, his attraction was purely intellectual at first. He had finally found someone who could match his intellect. Lewis agreed to enter into a civil marriage with her, not out of love, but so that she could continue to live in the United Kingdom after divorcing her abusive husband. After only 4 years of marriage, Joy died of bone cancer. After that, Lewis decided to take a holiday and was traveling for quite some time, but only 3 years later, Lewis himself died of renal failure. He was buried at the Friends of the Holy Trinity Church in Oxford.